Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first session of our seminar, Documentary Practices Workshop between Verification and Construction with our instructor, Manuel Correa. This workshop introduces the participants to the investigative potential of audiovisual images through practical exercises such as spatially situated testimony collection, audiovisual reconstruction of places, and open source intelligence. Participants will explore their personal research interests from a novel perspective and produce a piece in a meeting of their choice. We all carry cameras with us all the time, everywhere. This is why the narration of global events has undergone radical changes in the last decade. The impact of cell phone video and photography on documentary practice is evident in the documentation of social outbursts in Colombia, Chile, Argentina, and Hong Kong. By finding dissemination on the internet, these audiovisual images bypass traditional channels of journalism and analysis, complicating the notion of source truth. The analysis and media framing play a vital role in worldmaking and the consolidation of political narratives. This workshop will explore various research strategies, the conceptual development of projects, and innovative techniques to deal with the testimony and editing. The outcomes of this workshop will be fostering spatial analysis as a fundamental tool for the production of audiovisual narratives, learning multiple forms of conducting interviews for the camera, including traditional interviews and situated testimonies, strengthening critical thinking skills through verification and research tools, exploring ways to investigate using audiovisual tools combined with open source intelligence techniques, and understanding audiovisuals as tools for contemporary research and politics. Manuel Correa is a Colombian artist and filmmaker whose work explores memory and post-conflict reconstructions in contemporary societies. Correa's work is exemplified by the difficult task of negotiating highly complex and fragile social relations formed in the aftermath of trauma. He has used documentary filmmaking as a tool through which to bring people together, creating meeting points for the war victims, survivors, activists, and scientists. Correa has an MA Research Architecture from Goldsmith College, University of London. He is currently working as part of the Forensic Architecture Project. Correa's work have been presented in venues such as Rotterdam International Film Festival, Museo Tamayo in Mexico, Presentation House Gallery in Canada, the University of Copenhagen, the Manuel Museum of Modern Art, the 8th Norwegian Sculpture Biennale, Kunstnerhus in Oslo, Flux Architecture, Het Nieuwe Instituut, DOK Leipzig International Documentary Film Festival, among other places. Manuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vitor, for the introduction. And I'm very happy to be here in the News Center again. I found that in the previous time that I thought in the News Center, the level of the participants was quite high. So it's always a great, honor to be here, to be, guiding you. So this class is going to be quite different than the last one that I gave, and I will tell you a little bit about how I imagine that this class will develop, of the sessions. And please let me know if you hear me all right, and if you don't hear me, raise your hand at any point so that I can make sure that everybody is following me. So this class is my goal is to teach you in a practical way how to engage with some of the things that are necessary when you're making a project, especially a film project. Of course, this is quite open-ended, so I think a lot of these let's call them tools and techniques will be applicable for sound projects or even sculptures. So you will be able to find ways to navigate. In a sense, what I'm excited about is to be able to teach you things that were never taught to me in a university or in a proper, academic environment. A lot of it because, I think everybody develops their own path in an artistic practice. So we will always be finding ways that we can engage and develop, things as the challenges arrive. So I will start by telling you what the class is going to be, what the projects are going to be, because I think this is really crucial. The idea is that you develop a project that is yours, that relates to your practice, that you think it will be beneficial, as and that this space will offer you a beneficial forum to engage us and to engage each other, with your project, so that your project can, benefit from this, nurturing critical environment that you will find yourselves in. So the idea that we have, that I have about this concrete class is that it will be in 4 sessions. You may have noticed that different from the other classes in the new center, we don't have a class every week, but every 2 weeks. The idea is that you use the time to be able to develop it more, especially because the final project will be, will be kind of substantial. So the idea is that you start developing it from session 1 and until the day that it's presented, which will be, if I have it here, sorry, on the 11th of November. So we have quite a bit of time, a fair bit of time to be able to, to have a project. So and that's the reason for the session. So we will talk about, the presentations, the student presentations for this particular class will be very different. They will not be about a text that you read, but they will be about your project. You are pitching your project. Again, we will talk a little bit about this with more detail a little bit later on in the session, because I want to show you a video pitch that I did for an actual, real, cinema forum, and I'll tell you some tools and techniques about it. Of course, as with everything I say, please don't hesitate to take it with a pinch of salt or sugar if you'd like, because the last thing that, if there's forms that you don't like and that you are tired of or that you get bored of, like sometimes pitching can be really, you can always modify them and you can make them your own and try to make them exciting. If, I was just in the Venice Architecture Biennial, and I was very, very thrilled because, generally when the pavilions open, the national pavilions, there's always a political discourse. Somebody tell you this, thank you to the government of Correa who made this happen. Well, there was a country that did this political discourse as a karaoke. And I thought this was brilliant. It's evident nobody wants to hear this political discourse. So, by turning it around, you're suddenly, not only questioning the format, but you're making it, something interesting and quite else. So I encourage you to always, like, if there's something you don't, I'll teach you how things kind of work for me. But if there's something you don't like, you're always invited to subvert it and to turn it upside down. I guess if you're in this class, you're artists. So phenomenal. Let's work as such. So the big project is, of course, the final project. It could be a short film. It could be a sound piece. It could be a audio guide. You could choose whatever format you want. It could be endlessly open, right? The only thing that I would encourage you to is that it's a project that requires a conceptual and practical development that merits, being discussed and being, developed in a substantial way through this class. We will also talk today about situated testimonies. I'll tell you what these are in a second, and about the work that I've been doing with testimonies inside of forensic architecture. I'll show you a couple of videos. This is a class where, of course, since we're dealing with audiovisual, we will be presenting videos, and we will be watching a lot of things as we discuss them and we think through them. Needless to say, if you are interested in making a video or a sound piece or something photographic, and you need some form of technical guidance or questions, don't hesitate to bring them up, either with me through email or on the Discord. As a community, we're all hopefully here to help each other, and also, I'm here for you if you need. So this is important. So in session 2, so next class, so in 2 weeks, the idea is that you will pitch your project. So the pitch that I'm kind of asking you to do is a pitch that is from 3 to 5 minutes. Always try to steer more towards 3 than towards 5, although this can be quite challenging. You could do a pitch that is pre-recorded, or you could do, if you feel very confident about it, you could do the pitch right on. We will talk more about pitching in a little bit. I'm just giving you an overview, and then we'll jump a little bit on this. And then we will also, talk about open source intelligence. We will talk a little bit about it today. We'll touch on this subject matter, so that you know more or less how it's going. So, and on session 3, we will talk about soundscapes, listening, eavesdropping, and other, video and sound editing techniques. I think, this could be really interesting. I'll show you the practice of artists that I've came across that deal with this subject in a very interesting way. Also, you're welcome to ask for more material if you are curious about films or texts to read. Always ask. There's plenty of. But I do encourage you to focus on the practical aspects. So then the last session will be a screening. We will all watch the videos produced, or the sounds, or the images produced, sculptures, etc. in this class. So we'll do a collective round of critique. I'm very excited to see how this course develops. As you know, this is a course that has not been taught before, neither by me or anybody in the new center. I've taught similar courses in universities, but I think the forum of the new center is quite different and more exciting in a way. So we will change things and transform things as we move forward, right? So give me 1 second, because I'm getting a note in the group. Okay, perfect. So let's without further ado, let's get started. So I will start by telling you about how I started with this, and how projects develop. So I studied filmmaking, and then I studied forensic architecture, actually when I was already working with the disappeared. I'm Colombian. I'm currently based in Spain, but I've been working a lot with the victims of enforced disappearance in Colombia. The Colombian armed conflict, if you don't know, is a conflict that has been very, very long in time, more than 60 years, but very low intensity. So, there's been really big, events in it, but interspread to time, right? So it's very easy for somebody who lives in the country to don't have the feeling that there is a war raging on. This is really, really a crucial thing, right? Like, it's hard sometimes to know, what kind of things are going on in the countryside, who disappeared, where. So this is a war of disappearance. Basically, it's a war where the perpetrators are invested in hiding evidence about all the crimes that have taken past. So this is where documentaries become interesting, right? Like, how do you start, evidencing things that other people have been so invested in trying to delete? So in this kind of like personal mesh, I met Fabiola Lalinde. Fabiola Lalinde is a war survivor, or she calls herself that. Her son was one of the first people disappeared by force in Colombia. And she has been a very, very famous human rights defender in Colombia. Her personal archive that documents the search for her disappeared son has become a World Heritage by the UN. She's traveled the world teaching people how to look for the disappeared. And her story is quite complex and quite difficult, and tells you a lot about the nature of evidence and how evidence develops. So I will tell you about enforced disappearance, because it's paradigmatic of this kind of practice that I deal, and I'll tell you how I started making it all come together. So enforced disappearance as such is a crime that happens in 3 different stages, right? First, a person is kidnapped. Then, is illegally detained or kidnapped by maybe the military or special security forces, or sometimes paramilitaries. Then there's a violence against the body of that person. So this person is tortured, executed. But what really defines this crime is that it's a crime against evidence. The last stage is the perpetrators remove everything that can lead to the crime itself. So they deny that the crime happened. They will deny even, and as it has happened in Chile, that the disappeared person was ever born. So we're talking about something very difficult here because it's a crime against evidence. If we really break down the etymology of evidence, it is that which is visible. So it's a crime that makes people disappear. It makes it invisible. So I started thinking, okay, so how do I try to make something visible, but something that is also, maybe a little bit activist and maybe work, but in a different kind of scope. So I got in contact with Fabiola again, very. This is like the things that nobody teaches you, but they're super simple sometimes. I literally wrote to Fabiola Lalinda an email. I didn't know her from anything. I wrote to her. I told her, "Hello, Fabiola. I'm starting the research of a film project. I want to tell you a little bit about what it is. It's only developing. Would you like to have a coffee with me?" So I went to her house. I had a coffee with her. She told me her story. It was a very, very difficult story. When we bonded and we decided, yes, definitely, we want to collaborate. I always encourage you, like, right, you can get is that they don't answer. But if you want to make a film about whatever, write to the people who are involved in it, the communities who are involved. If it's not about people, if it's about architecture or it's something conceptual, write to the philosophers that are dealing with this, or write to the architects that design the places or that are trying to challenge a place. So yeah, I think, write to people. Always people are excited about these things, get a coffee with them. You will be surprised. I've rarely gotten a no. And so this is, a very good tip, I guess. Um, so what happens when you have this complex situation about evidence, visuality? In the case of Fabiola Linde, I will show you a video that I produced with Fabiola about her story. It's a very short part of the film The Shape of Now, which is a film that was released in 2018. It's been going around. I will share you this folder. Wait, share, copy link. I'll share this folder and let's watch video one. Give me a second. I'm looking for the chat. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand with the button thingy, and then I will be super. Here's the link. And I'll tell you why this is relevant in a second. I'm trying to tell you about my process, how I develop things. So let's do this. Let's turn our cameras off. And then when you're back, after finishing the video, turn them on so I know you're back. Hello. Most of you are back. So, okay. Let's wait a second. I think some of you are connecting still. So with this kind of project, especially when you're dealing with very sensible subject matter, and you're dealing with crimes against humanity, and you're dealing with personal traumas. I mean, for me, it has been very important to guide myself through working very ethically and through using theory as a way to navigate a very, very complex, multifaceted, and difficult landscape. This is where theory becomes really, really crucial to me. Not so much as a tool to illustrate, but as a tool to navigate, this complexity. So in the case of Fabiola Lalinde, we can talk about the complexity of evidence and truth production. What happens is that when Luis Fernando was disappeared in '84, her son, as you saw there, they removed his fingertips. The technique that the government had at that moment to disappear to identify the disappeared was to do dactylar testing. So the first thing that the first counter technology to that the government started employing was cutting the fingers if they disappeared, so then they couldn't be identified. Then Fabiola Lalinde, through her incredible insistency, she established not email. She started mail communication with people like Clyde Snow, Marie Claire King, who were the founders of forensic anthropology as a discipline. Um, Forensic anthropology is a discipline. Some people claim, I mean, Tom Keenan and Eyal Weissman claim that the start of this was with the identification of the school of Mengele in Brazil in 1978, if I'm not mistaken, where basically like Snow did what he calls brain skull superimposition. So you have the skull that they found of Mengele, and then you can average how deep tissue is in different parts of the face, and they would superimpose the images into with this calculation into an image of Mengele alive. So they would say that definitely this was Mengele. So if you can think about it, the origins of forensic anthropology as a discipline are already rooted in image production. So what happens when Fabiola Lalinde starts working with Clyde Snow to identify her son? Well, he does a face superimposition and says it's likely your son. The government of Colombia rejects this as evidence. It says that it's not scientific. And eventually enough time passed that DNA testing was invented in the 90s. So the first laboratory that was established in Colombia was by the government. And this laboratory, it was later found out, was created with a large investment with the sole purpose of saying that the disappeared body she found was not her son. So what we're talking about is that as the tools for the production of evidence become more and more complex, DNA techniques, first dactylar tests and DNA techniques, and face called superimpositions, then the techniques of finding evidence and counter-arguing evidence have to become more and more complex. The role of people who are invested in finding evidence or in finding some forms of truth, although this is quite a complex subject, and actually my last seminar was mostly about this, and you're welcome to watch it. It's on the archive. The complexity of this is that we all try to find out about a past event. How did this event actually took place? Did it actually take place? Who were the actors? How were they involved in it? Or be it, a natural actor, an architectural actor, a person, and a more than human actor, if you could say. So we're always trying to find out this moment of incipient of inception of this event. Of course, with the disappeared, it's super, super clear, right? Like we try to find out, and that takes us, from one event to another, right? In the case of Fabiola, it's evident that that this became quite hard. So I started working with other victims of disappearance in Colombia. And basically, we got to the conclusion that the only way that you could find truth is by getting the perpetrators themselves to say what they did. You know, as as it is, a common adage, only the perpetrator can solve the crime. It happens because the perpetrator, often was in the crime or planned the crime. So we started thinking, okay, so like, how do we manage to do this and I met a group of ladies that are called the Madres de la Candelaria, which is a mothers association of mothers in Colombia and Medellin that are looking for the disappeared. So before years, 10 years or so before I met them, they were going to jails and talking to the inmates, and the inmates would tell them things like, maybe I was not the person who killed them, but maybe somebody knows. And they started finding things, but due to a peace process that happened in Colombia with the paramilitaries, it became very difficult for the mothers to go back to jails because there was a corruption case with another association. It became quite difficult. So it was very difficult, to access. I tried everything. As I tell you, I write emails all the time. So I wrote emails to politicians. I got politicians to support me, and the politicians would write to the jail institute. I tried everything. It all failed. There was no way of going with the mothers to the jail. Until one day I was having lunch with my mom and her friend told me that she was going to jails, theater plays, as a form of like social charity or what have you, philanthropy. So sure enough, I went to the Mothers Association in the gym on a Friday. I used to meet them on Fridays, and I told them, "Hey, mothers," and they're all like very charming elderly ladies. I told them, "Hey, mothers, so have we thought about making a theater play? I think we can do this to get inside the jails." So we wound up having a relationship in which they wrote the theater play, they made the wardrobes, and I used my CV as an artist, whatever, to make sure that the jails, let us in. I didn't say we are a victims association. I said we're a theater collective of elderly women from the city who are engaged in philanthropic activities, and it actually worked. We managed to get inside of jails, and they managed to befriend, it, in some cases, the possible perpetrators of their children's disappearance. And this is how some of them managed to find some forms of evidence leading to this whereabout, to the whereabout of disappeared people. So if we think about this is a form of, it's quite quite a complex thing, but I always thought that this was the most direct and almost open source way, of creating a theater to hijack, the public institutions, right? Like the institutions were not giving the mothers the truth that they needed in order to find closure, to be able to mourn their disappeared, to accept that they are gone. Because again, since one of the things that is the most difficult about enforced disappearance is you don't know where the person is. So we don't have evidence that they were dead or that they were kidnapped or that they were, disappeared in any case. So they could be alive. And it just happened that one of the mothers, for instance, was looking for her disappeared husband, and he had just run away and he was living in another town for 20 years. And he appeared, back again. So you talk to one of the mothers and you ask them, what is your biggest fear? They will tell you that, that the phone rings and I don't pick it up. Maybe it was my son. So it's that kind of level of violence. It's a continuous, non-stopping level of violence that just, rivens everything and destroys everything. I'm telling you all about this because I'm trying to show you insights into the way that I work. I create nexuses with links with communities. I ask them, what do you need? The goal that they had is very clear. They wanted to go to jail, so I work in the service of making them go to jails. Because it's a way that I can establish a practice that not only is not paternalistic, but that it's actually guided by what other people want. I don't speak for them, I speak next to them or, with them sometimes. And this is kind of what is really exciting about it for me. A lot of these kind of projects, especially when human rights are involved, which is mostly what we'll be talking about in this first session, require, a form of community. If you, for a lot of forensic architecture works, for instance, you have satellite images, you have 3D reconstructions, but without the truth that the communities are able to add into this web, or this kind of like a network of evidence and narrative, there's no project that holds. It's always fundamental to speak to the people in the field, to work with either the survivors or activists or people who are in the place. There is this really erroneous notion, and this is a very opinionated idea. Of course, it's contestable, but I still think that there is no investigation that is unbiased. The fact that somebody is reporting on somebody on something or an event or whatever means that there is already a bias towards this form of practice. So I encourage you to be biased. I encourage you to sit down where you are from your perspective and do your projects that are deeply yours, that are deeply meaningful and situated. This doesn't mean abandon truth. And again, there's this whole seminar that I gave about this that is less practical and more theoretical, perhaps. But this doesn't mean abandon truth. Be really rigorous. You have to find the most complex ways of producing evidence that is credible, that you have actually the possibility of convincing people that an actual event took place. There's no surprise that the words that a judge creates a conviction. A judge is convinced that an event took place within a certain degree of possibility, right? You create a form of. So this is really important, that in terms of truth making. Another instructor of the new center who I've worked with, I emailed him one day and I went to his house and I interviewed him, and then I kept, a long conversation with him, was Fernando Salamea. He's a philosopher of mathematics. I don't know if you're familiar with him. One of the most interesting, philosophers that I've come across. I've read many of his books. Fernando Salamea, tells us that in the last few decades, over 60% of mathematical knowledge production has been created, and this is due to the mathematical breakthroughs of mathematician Alexander Grothendieck. Alexander Grothendieck, one of the most interesting things he did is that he came out with a system that is called intermediate logics. So basically, and of course, I'm paraphrasing Salamea, but I understand I'm not a mathematician, so this is important also as a context. But basically what we had before is, a system of binary truth where things are either true or false. And where we are heading right now, or where math is heading, and I think, this can be applicable to cultural production, is spaces of intermediate truths. What happens in the middle, what the grays, where the grays occur. So it is no longer so interesting, and I think it's no longer very productive to say I hold truth. It's productive, to explore what happens in the middle, what happens when different things are projected. So you have the system that is basically, if you think about it, like a mesh. Do I have an object to illustrate? Well, I'll just do this. I wish this was a polygon. It would be much nicer. But imagine that you take all the parts of this side, no? And you're basically differentiating the object. So you have this part, this part, this part. And then you test to see what is true. So, and then you reintegrate it. And when things add together and they add into the form, you have more or less something similar to truth. So in the case of my work, or in the case of forensic architecture's work, these fragments of truth that make up, a past event could be witnesses, could be photographs, things found online, news articles, court cases, and all sorts of probatory things. I encourage you to think like that, to think, as large a context as you can, because I think in the past, the way that people thought about investigators and research-heavy practices, mostly people thought somebody in a studio with a pipe doing some Sherlock Holmes thing, and basically like a nutcracker, somebody who's like gonna crack the nut, and basically you take the nut and hit it with a hammer and you have the nut inside. I think if we use if we use metaphors to see what I think we're doing is you try to submerge the nut in a context that is so large that it dissolves the nut, the outer shell. So you wind up with an entire nut through this submersion in a large plethora of vectors, right? So this is I think the modern way that truths are being constructed for these kind of practices. I want to show you about the theater play that I produced with the mothers. I will show you a short clip that I've also prepared for you, so that you get an idea of how this works, how this operates, how this looks filmically. This is a form of situated testimony where we don't really know. I mean, the mothers are there. Basically, they're telling you their testimony. I am this person and this happened to me, but they're not really telling you, the audience. They're telling the perpetrators in the jail to be able to convince them that they should try to help them find the disappeared. Give me a second. I'm going to look for the link and I will jump into it. Wait, copy link. Sorry. And then, and before I share it, do you have any questions, any comments that you'd like to make? Yes, Alja. How do I pronounce your name? Sorry.
Hi, I'm Aglaya. Can you hear me? Okay, make like that if you can hear me. Okay, thanks. I'm Aglaya. I'm not an artist. I'm an art historian. And I happened to watch a very strange movie of Gadar like last night. And it was a documentary. It was a 1970s film entitled Struggle in Italy. So, I mean, it was very difficult, it was not artistic, it was actually very documentary. And he himself would make like 3 parts of the movie and then deconstruct them, like explain what he was doing on the first part, on the second part. And he put like a lot of attention on the black, like the moment then of the montage when he makes the screen black. So I was watching this part of the documentary, noticing how do you do the montage. So you showed many pictures, like not all these videos, and this montage like black or like historical like documents, I guess, like photographs. And the first things were like, as you told us, the documents of the court or the like newspaper views. And I was just thinking, like, if you say documentary, so you actually make us see documents. And it just struggled me. I mean, it's so simple. You say documentary documents, but I've never thought about that like that. And why I am joining this workshop, it's because I'm trying to find out the ways I can do interviews, like not in order to just reproduce what a person told to me, but to make it more truthful. So to use maybe some materials, but I don't really know how to. Like, can you show a picture? Can you show something like a historical document? Or should you just document the person who is like really saying these words? So I just wanted to thank you and say these like little things I noticed. That's it. Thanks.
No, this is amazing. This is a really good question and comment. So I have actually a lot of thoughts about this. This is a lot of what I work on. Basically, I do a lot of interviews where I have things, objects, maps, aerial imagery, and things, and I show them to people, and I try to remember, past events as they happen. So they go through it. Basically, and this is where the idea of situated testimony comes from. I mean, forensic architecture has its own way of thinking about situated testimony. In my personal opinion, documentaries always do situated testimonies, or it's very common. It's been very rehearsed and very developed. I think I don't know if you guys are familiar with Shoah, the film by Claude Lanzmann. I mean, I think it's one of the masterpieces of cinema. It's a very, very difficult film to watch. It's very, very difficult emotionally. But the film opens with, or at the very beginning, there is a scene of a boy that was called Simon, who was known when he was a kid in a concentration camp because of his singing. So basically, many years later, and I think maybe it was 20 years later, 25 years later, Claude Lanzmann finds Simon. He finds him in Israel, and he convinces Simon to go back to the place where the concentration camp used to be. So, which is now a forest. So Simon goes to the place and tells him, here, there was this in this place. I remember in this place, this was where the quarters were, and this is where the river was. So basically he starts saying, this is where the river is, this is where the chambers were, this is where the gate was, and he starts reconstructing it. So basically, there is a way that you can link always. It's because memory a lot of times is spatial. We remember space. Going through space helps us, and you'll see a video about this. I will share it at the end of the class, and you can watch it after the class is finished, because I really want you to watch it about forensic architecture. And it's a project that we produced about. I mean, I'll tell you more about it later. But it's about how you can memory and visual information is very linked to space. And through these kind of reconstructions, we can remember, events as they take place. So this is excellent. There's also ways that we documentarians challenge, historical or archive research practices. For instance, I'm doing a research in a monument here that's called the Valley of the Fallen, which you will hear a little bit more about it, I'm sure. And the archive of this place, where 33,800 people, out of which 15,000 are disappeared, is in the Royal Palace of Madrid, and the archive is unindexed, and it's like 250 boxes. As a researcher, they let you take only 9 boxes a day, and it's quite complicated to get an appointment there. So it's basically, to be able to find a document that you want, you have to have immense luck. 9 boxes out of 200, very difficult. So I thought, okay, well, how do I get to find out what is in all the boxes? So I have a team, a research office in Madrid, and we're 10. So we booked all of the appointments, we got all of the boxes, and what we did is that we created an index. We created a database of everything that was in every box. So there's always even like ways of doing like a counter archivist, if you call it, if we can say, there's like counter forensic, we can say like there's a counter archivist human right kind of action, of going and like scouting everything and like emptying everything, so we know where to look. And we made it open source, so all other investigators that want to know what is there, they can find it easily and just like look for it, and we'll know if it's there or not, right? So we always deal with documents, right? I mean, not me. When I say we, I mean me and forensic architecture. Many documentarians deal only with testimony or only with images and such. So I will show you the second video. Take a look at it. This is the jail, the jail scene. I edited it briefly, so there's like 2 parts of the video. There's one where there's the testimony of the victims, and there's the one where there's the theater play. Let me know what you think. Actually, I see that there's a question by Ishita, so if you want, Ishita, we can say now.
Yeah, I was thinking about truth and memory and event, and especially in where, say, trauma is involved. I was thinking how memory plays tricks on how we remember things, and the truth of the memory could be different from the truth of the event, right? And in that case, then as, say, documentary practitioners, where should the fidelity be? And like, is that an ethical question, or could it be, if you go by the idea of situated testimonies, then, I was thinking of even Donna Haraway and the idea of positionality, where you could say from the get-go that, this is the truth of the memory and not the truth of the event. And then the fidelity lies very much to the psyche. So I was just thinking, all these terms are also quite slippery in nature. And film as a medium lends itself to slipperiness much better than, say, a book, for that matter. So I was just hoping how you explore the cinematic as a medium to do that.
I think memory errors, lacunae, false memories. There's a lot of research about false memories, and again, my last seminar was very, very heavy about this. It's very crucial to understand memory. A lot of times it is actually where memory fails that we may find truth, not where memory works. So, for instance, we were working, I was not part of this project, but I know it quite well. There's this project that Forensic Architecture did in Pakistan about drone bombings. And the witness in this case could not remember, where the impact was that killed her husband. And then she started trying to remember, and there was a fan, like a ceiling fan. And she started putting in the ceiling as a ceiling fan, and she put it as a fan, like that, like a stand-on fan. And eventually, when she placed the fan in a courtyard in the house, she remembered that actually it was there, and that she remembered scraping, the remainders of her husband from the fan. It was a very, very traumatizing memory. This is why these processes have to be very, very careful. They have to be very mediated. In processes like this, it's good to involve psychologists and to really think, ethically, where do you want to situate yourself, and where do you want to situate people? Because also, it has happened that as I'm doing an interview, I know somebody is telling me something that could not have happened. And they're still telling it to me, and I have to listen to it, and I have to decide if I want to challenge it or not. And it's very difficult when you're dealing with somebody who's in a traumatic situation. Actually, with working with war victims, something that has happened to me in a personal level that was very moving was one of my first impressions is that I went there 1 week and I could go next week, and the same person will tell me the exact same testimony with the same stops, with the same commas, basically, with the same punctuation. They would tell me the exact same testimony. So I realized very quickly that they were not they were not retelling the event from memory, but from the memory of retelling the event, which is different. You're not going back to the event, you're going back to the memory of telling it. So this is quite difficult, and there's a lot of research about memory. There's Stephen D. Lindsay and Beth Loftus, who have proved that there is actually a lot of false memories, things that you remember as actual lived experience that you did not live, that you may have heard or watched in a movie, and then you remember them as your autobiographical memory. So this is very complicated, and you have to navigate this complexity. It's always, the great filmmaker who passed recently from Colombia, Luis Ospina, who was a documentarian, he always said that in fiction films, there's a lot of truth, the truth about the filmmaker, the truth about, the historical context. And in documentaries are lies on the surface of truth. So I think there's something beautiful about it. It's always know that you're navigating a very complex multi-layered field, and that there's no total, binary truth of true versus false. You navigate the grays, which is what I want to incite you to, and which Salamea has really inspired in my practice. I will share you the second video. Let's watch it, and let's do the same thing again with the camera as we turn it on when we watch it. And if you have questions, I'm here. Hey there. Questions, comments, concerns? Hades. How do I pronounce your name?
Hi, thanks. My name is Haris. That made me think a lot about a film called Selfie by 2019, which was basically a documentary where the director gave two iPhones to two 16-year-olds in a district in Naples where a killing of another 16-year-old by police took place. And engaging them with art could not really, I don't remember if they found new evidence about the crime itself, but they showed the social and they captured the social situations within this area and between people there. This is basically a district of slums where people lost their houses after a war. And it showed how easy it was for this situation to happen and how people living in this area didn't have actually a say to this. They were engaged with this violent social social environment. They grew up there and they had no choice to live it and grow and have a simple and safe life. So I wanted to ask about like how these practices could also benefit the broader understanding of how these crimes are produced socially and basically not that there's a way not to go for the crime or what you want to investigate itself, but to give a broader sense of what's happening and how possible is this, and to give shed light to the broader thing.
No, this is really interesting. Yes, absolutely. So I mean, I think this is something that documentaries and documentary work can do very well. It does it better when documentary deals, and this may sound a little bit strange and counterintuitive perhaps, but anyways, it does it better when it deals with the subjects in an abstract way. Because when you deal with the subjects in an abstract way, you start creating forms of perhaps empathy. I think empathy is important. It's very important in this kind of work, in this kind of subject matter. And sometimes we relate to things through empathy when they're more abstract. This is actually something that is very surprising, but this is something that I'm trying right now. It's kind of an experiment. Again, always everybody will have different results from experiments. But I'm starting a film with a scene of a younger woman going to a cemetery. She goes to a cemetery, cleans the flowers, meets somebody, goes for a little walk, and you feel as an audience a couple of things. First, the woman is not from this town. Second, it feels like she goes there a lot and puts new flowers, and then when the audience watches this, and from a couple of tests, I felt before that I had to explain what the scene was. Like, hello, I'm the director of this association of people who are looking to exhume or relatives who disappeared in the Spanish Civil War, and they're taken by Franco or moved into his mausoleum. So I felt this was necessary. And then this grave that she's cleaning is the grave where her great uncle was. But actually, what created the most, empathy in this kind of sense and let people to understand the crime better and the impact of the crime was when they would watch this without any context. They would start watching it, and then you will kind of find out what it was that she was doing, and that she was doing it very like as a very common thing, going to this graveyard in a faraway town and putting flowers to her great uncle who was disappeared. And then you get the idea that this person has a personal search that is not only like intellectual perhaps, but also has like deep material resonances in her life. She has to spend a lot of money to travel there. She has to move from one side to the other, and this gives you like an impact of the emotions on it. So sometimes being more abstract allows you to understand, you know, the social causes of a crime, the social consequences of a crime. I think again, you know, the only way to understand
Manuel, you went mute.
Sorry, where did I come? Can you, does anybody? No. Sorry, I'll just keep going. Sorry about that. That's a technical moment. A lot of times the only way to find out, you know, about a past event and the social causes of a crime is through the perpetrators. The perpetrators are crucial in this. And actually, I think one of the big mistakes in a lot of post-conflict scenarios is that the perpetrators are not actually involved in a matter of truth-telling. So say, for example, in Colombia, I mean, generally, when you create a post-conflict agreement or a peace agreement, you have to negotiate a couple of things. The main being, how much justice do I want? I mean, do I want everybody? How much truth do I want? How much, you know, disclosure do I need about past events? Did this actually happen? How did it happen? Who took place? Basically, the two can go hand in hand, because if a perpetrator commit a lot of crimes and you say, I want a lot of truth and not so much justice in this sense, then you can say, well, if you tell us what you did, we will not prosecute you. So they go and they tell and they don't prosecute. Basically, you create an amnesty. This is amnesty comes from this amnesia. If you say, you know, we don't want to know what took place, we do an amnesia, we create amnesty, and then it's over, right? But because also we have to remember that the justice system is a system for the production of truth. This is really important. The justice system is a system for the production of truth. What is established in courts becomes a socially accepted and judicially and politically accepted truth. It's important. But the judiciary goes very slow and often invisible to media. So these truths are not, they don't have the impact. And a lot of times, because of the way that the system works, punishment, etc., people are not very willing to declare what they've actually done. So in a post-justice scenario, you want basically truth, justice, and reparation. How do you repair the victims? A lot of times to truth. You know, especially victims of disappearance. They want to know where the disappeared ones are, what happened to them. If you are a victim, an economic victim, that your assets were seized over because whatever, you want your assets back. So how much truth do you want? How much reparations you want? This is always a crucial part of this negotiating triangle. And I think this is a long way to answer your question, but it's also something that it's important to think. You know, documentaries can create truth in the sense that, for example, Errol Morris's documentaries have gone, you know, and produced new evidence to courts and have taken people out of jail. In the case of the Thin Blue Line, in the case of Avi Mogravi's documentary, A Reconstruction, he put people into jail, and he found out that the people who were accused of this murder of a young Palestinian boy were not actually there, even though they were saying they were actually not there. They totally had the whole thing wrong. They were being paid to say that they were. So documentaries can do that, but a lot of times what they do is more subtle. They work as a form of an amnestic justice, justice against amnesia, to remember. To remember something is a form of justice to victims in many conflicts, especially when disappearance is going on, or when the side that won is the opposite side and it's crushing on their memories. We also have to be careful of this. And I think, you know, the American context is very, very, very ripe with conflict about this. A lot of the first memorialist groups that we have notion of are the sisters or daughters, I forget, of the Confederacy, you know, to remember the Confederates, right? So we have to be very careful, you know, which movements do we accept, which memories do we want, which memories don't we want. We always have to take these decisions. We cannot remember everything. We have to choose what we remember and how we remember. And to choose what we remember is always a political act. So this is my little, you know, speech about it. When we're dealing with crimes against humanity that deal with disappearance, which is, again, of course, a very recurrent subject in my talks, in my classes, because it's what I'm dealing with the most and what I consider myself to be an expert on. We're dealing with crimes that have no evidence. We don't know if the person is alive or dead. So they're definitely legally alive, right? If we don't have a death certificate. Again, you know, the law produces systems of truth. So if we don't have a death certificate, the person is therefore considered to be alive, which is, you know, way past their function, the possible, you know, bodily function. So what happens when they have other forms of crimes? When we not only have evidence, but we have a lot of evidence. We have so much evidence, so much documents, so much information that is unmanageable. It's super hard to narrate. So I will show you a part of a project that we did in forensic architecture that is about the Palace of Justice in Colombia. I'll tell you a little bit about this conflict and how to navigate it conceptually. But basically, this was the most mediatic event in the whole history of the Colombian armed conflict by far. There was news people from Spain, from Japan, from the US, all there filming. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people filming, you know, for 2 entire days, this very, very documented event. Then the case went on for a very long time because there was 27 people who were disappeared, and then Supreme Court magistrates who were executed. So it was a very, very, very complicated case with an insane amount of production. This is anecdotal, but when we started doing the research, one of the members of forensic architecture, you know, said, you know, I calculated, and the court documents that we have are as much as the mathematical, you know, it's as much pages as the mathematical calculations that were necessary to take humans into the moon. So you can imagine, you know, we're talking about a great, unmanageable, you know, unwieldy form of evidence. Basically, we calculated that if we were to read everything, we would need like something like a couple of lifespans. So there was just no way that we could engage in this, you know, with normal tools. So when we do with an event that is so documented that it becomes hard to narrate, it becomes hard to find out what the truth in it is. There's a pile of documents that basically casts invisibility about narratives, about trajectories, what happened to the bodies, what happened to the people. And then in the aftermath of the event, it was found out in a way of interview that I think Aglaya will be interested in, actually, where I interviewed one of the cameramen. This is a form of situated testimony, perhaps, if we could think about it. I interviewed one of the cameramen, and I asked him about the material that he had shot that night, those couple of days, and we looked at everything, and there's a lot of things that he found out that were missing. And through this, we started expanding the investigation, and we found out that there was a lot of material. Even though there was hundreds and hundreds of hours, there was a lot of material that was missing. I think it's more eloquent if I show you the video itself, and you will get it because it's part of an editorial process. It's part of a construction of a narrative. So it's going to be a little bit more clear. Let me find the link. I see Christina has a question. If you want, Christina, the floor is yours. You're muted.
Yes, sorry. My question, I just wanted to come back to the play, and I have a question about how to say, like, the safety of the person who does the research, because we have this example of Evgeny Berkovich, who made a play about Russian women who married terrorists from ISIS and, you know, traveled to Syria. And she was accused of terrorism for, like, you know, speaking about it, making it an artwork. So basically, of course, I mean, it's not exactly the same, or not at all the same case. But, you know, right now we're dealing with crimes against humanity happening in Ukraine. You know, and if you want to touch upon that subject, like how does a researcher protect himself? You know, in general, like I'm Russian, so, you know, I'm not in Russia, but, you know, if I ever were to research something that is around that subject, like how do you even do this? So yeah, that's my question.
No, this is a very good question, and I'm so sorry to say that I don't have very precise answers to it. So I will tell you some thoughts that I have. Always, you know, your safety is the most important thing. You have to always look for your safety, you know, and to know where you place yourself, where you situate yourself. With this project, with the Colombian Truth Commission, we were offered anonymity so that the project was published without our names. And then in the end, you know, we all thought, you know what, heck, we wanted published with our names. So we did this project, and we are happy to, you know, to take the risk because there's a peace agreement and the conflict is not so intense anymore. So we thought, okay, fine, there's some form of safety with this, and also because the Truth Commission was publishing our research as part of its official government, you know, research. So we were protected by them. So we thought, okay, fine, we're going to be protected by, you know, by the government in this kind of scenario. We have the backing. This is definitely not always the case. Definitely, especially if you are in Ukraine or in Russia or definitely in Iran, it's very difficult. And, you know, I know a lot of Iranian researchers who are absolutely and rightfully terrified of publishing or making the research about the regime or the crimes that the regime costs, because they can have, you know, profound impacts on their livelihood or their relatives in Iran. And I think this is all, you know, very well. I don't encourage you to take any risks unless you really feel that you want to. Of course, the risks that I've taken have been, you know, going and meeting paramilitaries who have killed, you know, probably thousands of people and meeting them in their office for coffee. You know, it's just this some of the scariest things that I have dealt with. But yes, I think it's always, you know, I remember Eyal Weizman, the director of forensic architecture, was telling us an anecdote that he felt like he's watched, you know, hundreds and hundreds of videos of people getting shot, you know, the last moments of people's lives, people filming in the Palestinian conflict with their phone cameras, and you know, the camera drops to the floor and the person is fatally wounded or dead, and the camera keeps recording. And there's always this impression that he's transferred into us, that a lot of people felt that they were very safe when they were doing these recordings, and perhaps their sense of safety was misplaced. They were not so safe. They in fact died or were shot. So it's important, you know, that you take, you know, precautions. Depending on the research you're doing, you try to always be more in the safe side. You know, publish through channels that are encrypted or through VPN, have communications, you know, on channels that you know are, you know, with proper encryption. You know, maybe don't use so much, you know, WhatsApp, Telegram, etc. Maybe move a little bit to Signal, or, you know, other forms of communication that you may trust more. You use a PIN. You know, it's a thing, you know, depending on how you communicate with, who you communicate with, what context are you reporting, the things will be different. If you're reporting in Colombia, you may have, if you go to the countries, I mean, to some places where the conflict is raging, you will probably be at risk. But, you know, there's not going to be any, like, or not very important, you know, digital surveillance, for instance. So this is something to keep in mind, right? Which the case in Russia or definitely Iran, quite different. So keep that in mind. So I know it's not a very precise answer because it kind of will really depend on the context, but just some sort of guidelines. And I will share with you this that I promised. Give me a second. I share it. Link to the film number 3. So this is the Palace of Justice video. You will see it. It has a fragment of the testimony. It's edited. This is not really how the video is. You can find the whole video online. Architecture, if you want to watch it. If you want to watch the whole thing, so if anything I'm sending you, I'll be happy to share. But I just put this together. I edited it together in this way so that it could flow to what we're talking about. Here you go. Let's do the same thing with the camera. It's an easy way. So I am finding that I cut the video in two, and the second part is in another link, which is where I have the interview that I talked to you about. You can find it here. Actually, it may be more productive if we watch this video and talk about the whole thing. So the first one is the introduction to the project, and then the second, which is much shorter, is the link to the actual interview, which is a form of situated testimony. We'll deal way more with situated testimonies. But I think this class, this is one of the ones you'll find. I don't know if everybody's here. I don't know how do we do this. Can you hear me? Okay, so any questions about this? Any comments? Any concerns? Katerina.
Yeah, I was wondering how important is for your practice the auditory part of a testimony, because again, you work in a field which is like very much visual dominated, and how you tackle, like, for example, interviews that people might not want to be on a video or something. Yeah, that's my question.
This is excellent. I mean, you're very, very right that I work mostly visually. I generally work with a camera and with a notebook taking notes. A lot of times I go and I interview people and I don't go with a camera or any sound recording mechanism or anything, because I think also a lot of times for me, I mean, then this is very personal and it's going to change, I'm sure everybody will have a different idea. But for me, cinema is an excuse. What happens in between is much more interesting. So for me, what's interesting is going into the jail, for instance, with the mothers, and not necessarily producing the film. So sound is crucial a lot of times in testimonies, because sound allows people to. So if you see the work, for example, of researcher Lawrence Abu Hamdan deals with a lot of attention to the remembrance of sound. So through sounds, like people, whispering, people's echoes in the prison in Syria, the Sadmaya prison in Syria, he managed to do with forensic architecture a reconstruction of the prison, just through the remembrance of sound and the testimonies of sound, because especially in that kind of particular context, there was no access to scopic evidence. There's no way of, there was no images produced there. A lot of people were in the dark, so they couldn't actually see anything. So the memories was about sound. Sound became really important. Sorry, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I also feel it's quite interesting what you say also in terms of the gaze, like how we use the gaze in documentary as well. And I feel like sometimes the sound can also kind of eliminate this sort of like very, very subjective gaze, and maybe also like voyeurism that might be included in a documentary. For example, if I go back to your discussion or like comment about Palestinian people, or like, videos on like war territories that you see like a lot of very violent and raw images, it's also about how you can like shift this narrative from just being like explicit violent to also kind of how can it also like be objectively factual without necessarily victimize someone who is already like enough victimized, you know what I mean? It's like watching, I don't know, like videos from PETA, the NGO, about like animal abuse. I mean, I don't know exactly what I want to say, but I feel like also, how do you play around this idea of the gaze in a documentary?
Yes, this is fundamental. And I think this is the most fundamental question, actually, when you are doing a documentary, is the ethics of representation. Where do you speak from? Who are you? Where are you situated? Who do you talk to? How do you talk to? How do you represent them? Is there consent? What kind of consent is there? So for me, it's fundamental to work in a very situated way. I work close to the people. I never pretend that I'm speaking for anybody. I'm speaking for myself. I think speaking for people is basically a legacy of colonialism, which I think, it's important to. So I work in proximity to people. I speak next to them. And I do my work, where I am. My work is as much about them as it is about me, and this is something that we know and we always discuss. Generally, before I publish any films or I publish anything, I show it to the people who are involved. I ask them, how do you feel about it? It seems very common sense, but you would be surprised how rare it is that somebody's producing a film and will ask the people that they're working with, what do you need? What do you want? And then you'll find some of the most interesting things if you listen carefully. But it is rare, and this is why I personally work very situated. There's a lot of voyeurism. There's a lot of images that are sadly quite unnecessary in a way, that re-victimize people, that put people in a situation where they've lived terrible things and they have to tell you again. In my case, I thought, actually, I thought when I did The Shape of Now that I didn't want to know what happened to them. I wanted to know what they wanted to do or what the search was to solve it. Because I thought that was a way, and I discussed it with them. So it's a conversation. I thought it was a way to move forward, to not have something that is past oriented. This happened to me, but like, I'm doing this to fix this, basically, which I thought was much more interesting. Of course, there is in the clip that you saw, there is the testimonies of what happened to them. But the only reason you have this is because it's part of the play that they wrote. And they wanted this to be there so that it could be performed to the perpetrators. So it's part of this mechanism that they created. And as I see that we have a couple, did you ever edit the film after showing it to participants and before realizing? And I don't understand the last part of the question, but yes, I definitely edited the
Sorry,
film.
I mistyped. It was before releasing it.
Sorry? Oh, yeah, definitely. I always do. I always show the films to the participants. When I did The Shape of Now, I told the mothers of the Candelaria that I had a first cut. And, suddenly in this like tiny office, there was 90 elderly women looking at it and telling me what they felt. And this was really important. And there was actually changes to the film made after this, which is always really, really crucial. Like always listen. And when you thought you listened, listen again. I think this is, yeah. So I have a question from Ania.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to also bring up the question of audience, of what we demand or ask of the audience, like whether, we're putting them in the position of investigator, of judge, or of witness. And I think the most moving part of the documentary of the play was when they said, well, we are all victims of violence, including the perpetrators. And that was an extremely moving moment. And I've been thinking a lot about like trauma, and that there's no space for trauma in everyday life. So like art spaces can provide this opportunity for collective processing of trauma, but that does open up the question of audience and the demands we place on the audience, and what we want from each other in a way, or what we can give each other in terms of processing trauma also. I don't know if there's a question here, but
no, I don't know. But I think in the end, it's important to be there to see it. For them, it was actually kind of weird, but the way that they changed the way that they saw themselves as not victims but war survivors, it's also because they had a specific context in which, by doing this, the perpetrators told them what happened. So there was this exchange. But in Spain, for instance, where I am currently, the perpetrators, which were the fascist Franco regime and during the Civil War, they never got to tell them what happened. They never agreed on what happened. Actually, they quite the opposite. They just stepped on the other and then oppressed them entirely, pushed them violently during the dictatorship and destroyed their memories. So there's no way you can say that they're survivors. They're just literally victims. They never got any exchange of truth. In fact, the opposite. So again, you have a conflict there that had no justice, no truth, and no reconciliation. None. And it's been 80 years and people are still fighting about it. So this is a great example of what not to do as a society, right? Like you have to listen and to let people define themselves. So if you define yourself as a war victim or as a survivor, and if you see my film here in Spain, I clearly say war victim because this is what they will want. So this is my little comment. I have a question from Maglani. How do I pronounce your name?
Hi.
Sorry?
Akanksha.
Akanksha. Super.
Hi.
Sorry.
I'm thinking about kind of picking up from what Catalina was talking about with the gays. I was thinking, so you spoke about documentary as a way, the complexity of evidence and truth production. So I've always thought about documentary, and I'm not a practicing architect, artist, but always thought about documentary as two things, as a form of documentation, which in some ways kind of relates to what you said about remembrance as remembrance, but also within your practice and within forensic architecture, and I've seen quite a few of the works that you've got that has been made within forensic architecture. It's all incredible. But I'm also thinking about the form of filmmaking. So there's documentary and the premise of the practice, and then there is the form of filmmaking, which is the technicalities of it, which is the camera work. And within all of the documentaries that all the clips that we watched today, there were some very interesting moments of pause, there were some very interesting moments of where in the first one, there was a scene where you're just looking at a bookshelf. In the second one, there was the cat with the moving hand. And, like the scenery, the landscape where there's water dripping and, you're hearing these sounds. And I'm wondering, I understand the context and timeline in which you're looking at in which you're documenting and speaking to the disappeared. But for example, when you're looking at an active sort of war space like Palestine, which is also another space, which were primarily the documentaries that I've also seen, where there's active this thing. How do you create these spaces of pause within a traumatic sort of telling of a narrative, where you're also, which again connects to how what are your expectations of the audience, or how are you expecting them to kind of pick this up? Just additionally to this, like, what do you focus on? Like, how did you choose to focus on that bookshelf or that cat or that landscape, or where are these decisions sort of coming from, or how are you making them?
I mean, I think some of the most interesting, from my personal point of view, formally, documentaries about the Palestine conflict would be, for example, Dima Surji, or what's her name? She produced this film that's called The Wild Relatives, about the seeds. I'm sure somebody here must know. Let me Google. Jumana Mana. So I'll write to him. Jumana Mana, and I'll tell you what they're about. So Jumana Mana deals with the disappearance of types of seeds due to the conflict, and she goes back all the way to in the north, in the Arctic Circle, to the Svalbard storage of seeds, to recuperate these traditional seeds and bring them back. So she's looking at the conflict and what the conflict has done socially, destroying everything from nature to human lives to everything. But she's looking at it from a sideline, from a lens that is not, the people getting shot and getting killed, but telling you about the whole context in a very subtle way. The same, Dima Surji has this piece on Sebastia, where she deals with archaeology and with the digging up of the past as a way to understand the erasure of Palestinian heritage. For instance, I will tell you something. This is quite anecdotal. It's quite personal, again, and it's not documentary practice. But when I wanted to have people really understand what it was like growing during the years of where the Colombian conflict was very heavy on mafia, and I grew up in Medellin, so it's the city of Pablo Escobar, where all the bombings were. I would not tell them about the bombs. I would tell them, about my experience as a child. Like, we lived in a tower of buildings, so it was like the 12th story. And my mother would always be terrified when she would walk inside of my bedroom and she would see my shoes next to the door, because what if there is a bomb and the window shattered and you have to run and you trip on your shoes and you fall and you die, right? So I just told you everything you need to know about the conflict, about the intensity of it, the paranoia, the psychology, and I didn't tell you a single name. So these kind of things, when things become abstract and they become psychological, you have a way to see it and to understand it. I think in interviews I have this philosophy, perhaps that is a formal philosophy, I guess, is that a lot of times the rooms where people are, the rooms where the actions develop, where their thought occurs, where their life happens, can't tell you as much about them as their faces, their facial expressions. And actually, sometimes I think they can be a little bit more truthful. So somebody's trying to portray themselves as a total academic, blah, blah. So they put themselves, in front of a bookshelf, right? Or a scientist is wearing a white lab coat. Tell you, I know what I'm talking about. I could have a background here with a bookshelf, or I could wear a lab coat, and then my words would be no more true. But it will tell you about an intention. It will tell you about how you portray yourself. So as an exercise now, and I always do this myself, and I think it's worked wonders for me. What I do when I go to spaces where I'm going to shoot is that I think, what is for me the essence of this place? What are the objects, sounds, images that capture what I feel like when I walk into the space? So when I walked into the office of the Madres de la Candelaria, I saw the cat, which is a good luck cat that you can find anywhere. That is always there. I found the fan. Of course, the fan is easy to find. It makes a big noise. I had to actually turn it off when I was filming, but then also it was hard to turn off because it was smoldering hot. So I thought, the fan tells you it's hot, it's noisy, and it's kind of dark. I thought this was crucial for this. And then they also have this lucky cat kind of symbol, right? Then the academic has this big bookcase, and he's tiny in the bookcase, and he has so little light, he cannot possibly be reading his books there. So he must be taking them from the case and going to the other corner of his house to read them, because he can't possibly sit there to read them. So this is my question. It's how do I tell you the story about the place itself without the people in it? And actually, sometimes when I'm interviewing people, you've seen it in the shots I've showed you, I generally frame things quite wide because I want the space to be also a character. But this is something that I've developed kind of, through trial and error, and I don't have a formula for it. I have a couple of ideas of why I like doing it, what I get from it. Also, I think pause is very important. Pause is important because it allows you to observe. It allows you to feel things, to abstract. When you watch the cat is telling you things, not necessarily through language, or maybe through visual language, but it's connecting to something else, connecting to you visually and through emotions and through similar cats that you've seen, right? It goes to familiarity. Maybe you see a cat like that in a Asian restaurant that you go to, and then you say, okay, maybe this war victims office in Colombia is like a ramen shop, and it kind of is, maybe, and then you have this sort of this kind of familiarity, which I think is important. I'll share the short video of the situated testimony. Sorry, I forgot about it. This one is important. And actually, no, I have a question from Ishita, which I'd like to address before we move into this. Sorry, Ishita.
No worries. It's actually in line with this. When we were talking about what is it that we expect from our audience, I actually began to think about who is the audience, and there are different kinds of audiences, and when we are making documentaries or when we are documenting any events, how important it is to your practice to know exactly who the audience is and whether that impacts and to what degree the form the storytelling then takes.
So this is a question that I love, and I'm gonna give you a very opinionated take on it. Knowing the audience is important, but the audience doesn't know what they want. They don't really know. I mean, if you make a film and you say, okay, I want to make a film that where I can convince right-wing people that the conflict in Colombia is bad, then you're gonna make a very different film. In the end, you know what? I only want to make films that I want to watch. That's it. Can
I go to you on that? Can I go to you on that? Audience doesn't know what they want.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. And actually, you know, like I guess it's different, and you have to think more about the audience. If your audience are like children, perhaps. I don't make children's films. But you know, like I only want to make films that I will want to watch, that I think are good films. It's a way of being honest to myself. I'm not like I'm actually quite bad at thinking a lot about the audience. I should, you know, maybe work on it, but I always find that it's a little bit disingenuous. Like in the end, you know, I'm gonna make the film that I want to make, and hopefully it will find an audience.
Yeah, no, I asked it from a very, very
don't tell my producers, they will hate me.
Yeah, so even when say I'm making grant applications, they always want to know the audience, and you know, I never know how to answer that. So I was just, because every time somebody has to put money into this, obviously the communities that we are working with or the events that we are narrating, they don't have any funds that can be directed this way for the telling of their story. So the funds have always had to be requisitioned from the other side. Who's then interested in what is it in it for me? So it's also that kind of, you know, going back to what Akanksha. Yeah.
It's crucial for grant applications to be able to write something about the audience. Definitely. I mean, generally, I just write whatever they want to hear. That's it. You know, like, oh, so your organization is about, you know, whatever. Then I reverse engineer and I say, this film is about this, and I want to collaborate with this and this and this and this institution to find an audience, and I want to do an impact campaign that does this. But you know, and I think this is important. I mean, there's this like impact campaign guidebook which you can read. It's an ordeal, and it's very instructive. It can really work, and I encourage you to read it and think about it. But in the end, you know, the films that I like are the films that people make that they want to watch. You know, that they want to watch themselves. So I think a lot of times we live in the era of the dictatorship of the audience, and I think we need to revolt against this. We need to. The audience has no clue what they want.
All for it.
I mean, actually, when I'm an audience and I'm looking like a movie or whatever what to watch, I don't even have a clue what I want to watch either. You know, like how many films do I start watching that I take off after 10 minutes? I'm like, I'm not watching it. Paula, you have a question, no? You're muted.
Okay. Now you can hear me, right? Okay. Yeah, my question, I was always thinking about also about the audience and the public, no? Because we were focusing so much in the first role of communication, who is represented. So I'm very interested in who is receiving, no, this content. So you said at the beginning, I'm Colombian too, so I'm quite. I know context, so it's really important to think who is receiving it, no? Because as you said, in urban territories, in cities, violence is not perceived as in rural territories, no? So which platforms could be useful, who is seeing it, no? Because I got the chance to see the one of forensic architecture at the MAMU at Bogota. But who is visiting those museums, no? So I don't know if there is an answer.
Well, actually,
which
you know,
platforms do you think,
there's
or
not. I have an answer.
or which
actually, on that.
reactions have you got in Colombia?
So the MAMU exhibition about by forensic architecture, which is an exhibition about that was done in collaboration with the Truth Commission, which you just saw a part of, and then I have the other link about the second part. It's very short and I think very crucial about situated testimonies. A little bit faster now. So this is the last question for this part because I need to move on a little bit. It got a lot of audience because it was with the Bank of the Republic, and the Bank of the Republic has a lot of places rurally, and they have been screening the films. They have been doing an impact campaign on this project in rural communities. But I think it could potentially be that this project didn't get as much attention as our latest project, which was on the killing of Dylan Cruz, which was an activist in Colombia. The reason why this got a lot of attention is because a journalist leaked the project or leaked the findings of the project before the project was published, and then you know, kind of as a way to like make him the exclusive journalist, which was the goal that he had. Basically, he created a whole media strategy for how to release this and have a political impact. You know, like in a week, the video had like 13,000, you know, plays, which is crazy because it's a very long analytic video that was produced as evidence for a court, which is not the kind of videos that were produced for the public generally. Again, we think about an audience, but you know, we're always thinking like, okay, like the video for the court, do I really want to watch it? Maybe not. You know, I want to watch something that I can follow a little bit more steadily. You know, like these ones are quite that can be a little bit harder to watch, a little bit less fun, you know, to make and to watch. So, anyways, let's watch this short link that I sent you. I'll send it to you again. It's in the end. So we talk a little bit about situated testimonies, and then I move into the end of this session, which is about pitching. Hello. Okay, so let's jump right into the pitching. Well, actually, no, I want to talk a little bit about situated testimonies briefly. Before, there's going to be a video about this later at the end of the class. You can watch it whenever you'd like. It's half an hour, so I don't want to put it in the class. But basically, as you can see, by showing images to him and engaging him in his testimony, which is situated in this sense, situated in his memory, it's located in his memory of the event, being there and recording it and watching the things play afterwards. We found out as evidence that some of the material was deleted from the archives where it was supposed to be safe kept. So suddenly we found out that despite there being hundreds, if not thousands of hours of material, some of the very crucial elements we needed as evidence in the material were, edited out. So this was very meaningful to us. It basically, and this is something that is really interesting, and Eyal Weizman talks about this a lot, is that the absence of evidence, that when you don't have the evidence, that in itself could tell you something. You could look into it. When somebody can't remember something, when you don't have something in the archive, what does this tell you? Does it tell you about, omission? Does it tell you that it did not happen? Does it tell you about erasure, negligence? And what can this tell you in specific contexts? So the exercise for next class, and you may actually realize that this was a strange class in the sense, a strange first class, that because we didn't get to introduce each other. We generally, it's important to introduce everybody so that we get to know what the projects are that you want to develop, who you are. So the reason why we didn't do this is because we're doing it in the second class. The exercise for the second class is a pitch. You are pitching your project. So it's a 3 to 5 minute pitch. It could be pre-recorded, edited, it could be only sound, or it could be live during class. Just bear in mind that live during class could be a little bit harder, potentially, because, signal, connection issues, sound. But I encourage you to do as you feel happy with. Also, again, if you don't like the format of pitching, you are very, very welcome to that pleases you. If you want to find a way to do it as a karaoke, you're more than welcome. If you want to do it as a news article, again, more than welcome. So I think this is what it's going to be like. I'm going to show you a pitch that I made for a forum. It's a real thing that I produced in the search for funders. So it's a very real actual pitch. Some techniques that I can give you for pitching, and I'll take questions in a second. I'll be a little bit schematic about this because I think this can be very useful to you. Is that first think, okay, how complex is my story or what I want to show or tell? How do I tell it in the simplest way that can convey the most impactful parts in the shortest amount of time? It always helps you to be visual about your descriptions. How did you describe something visual? What are we gonna see? So basically, when you're, the audience will be wondering, what am I gonna see? What will I watch? What will I hear? What kind of photography? What kind of story? Are there characters? Who are these characters? Is it an essay film? Which kind of essay film is it? Is it experimental? What kind of experiment? Is it a sound piece? So even if you're doing even like a sculpture, I want you to pitch it to me, to tell me what are you gonna make, how are you gonna make it, and describe it to me visually. Try to sell it to me. I think it's important also, when you're an audience, you hear people pitching things, and you always wonder, Why is this important to them? Why do they want to do this? Because making a project is very complicated. You need a lot of time, you need a lot of resources that are personal, like moving from space to space, talking to people. So why do you want to do this? And sometimes this can be a very good way to introduce yourself. Now, I guess, by now, this couple of hours that we've been together, you probably know me a little bit more. But you didn't before. And now I can show you the pitch that I prepared for this, so you can get an idea. And then after this, we'll take questions. We'll think about the pitch together. Does that sound all right? Perfect. So I'll look for this video pitch, which is in the same folder somewhere. Oh no, sorry, it's actually a link. It's actually a link, and I have it here. Copy Vimeo, and you have it here. And write me questions. I mean, this was for a real thing. Generally, when they ask you, "Oh, you need to make a video pitch," they give you like a week, and you're like, "Oh my God, really? I have a week to make this?" Because it's like a lot of time, as you'll probably see. But anyways, let's watch this and let's look back. Sorry, I gave you the wrong one. This is the one for the end of the class. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Sorry. I don't know if you're here. This is the video pitch. Sorry. So the last one, the Vimeo one. Well, both are in Vimeo, but it's all right. Everybody found the video pitch. Okay, so I think everybody's back. Yeah, I guess this is the right moment to do more questions. If you have questions, this is as exercise, and we'll slowly start saying what happens. I think the final project, you can do it as long as you'd like. It could be a 10-minute film, a 5-minute film, a 20-minute film. I don't encourage you to go past 20 minutes generally if you're making a film, because it could be really anything. Again, as I tell you, I don't encourage you to go way past 20 unless it's like conceptually required, because of how time-consuming and complicated making films can be. The same with paintings, sculptures. Try to find something that you can research properly and that you can actually make the most out of. In terms of your time in the class. Of course, the longer it is, the harder it is going to be for us to take a very productive roundtable of critiques. Especially it is a large class, so it's good to keep that in mind. Christina. You're muted.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the open source, how to say, like documents, or like how, different ways of how he could research. So that would also like maybe help to understand like what project can I do and what I don't have the capacities to do, because like whatever can be done in the city, like without traveling also. So yeah.
Yes, actually, in the second session will be about open source investigations. I will actually a little bit more pragmatic. You will see when time comes. But definitely, I mean, be open to using things like images found on the internet, Google Maps, Google Street View. If you already have this wonder about the project and you may want to use some of this for the video pitch, I encourage you to look for Bellingcat's OSINT manual. I will type this here so you can. Or OSINT toolkit. I forget how they're labeled. You'll probably find it quite easily. So basically what it is, it's a PDF that they produced with all of the open source investigation softwares and how to use them. Basically, there's some software that are for looking at metadata in videos, so it allows you to look for YouTube videos based on the location where they were published from. So if they're published from the center or a specific neighborhood of Mexico City, for instance, you can Google for all the videos published there by date, and of course by zone, like based on the IP. You have things like open source imagery. It tells you where things are and what dates they are. Metadata scrapers, so you have images taken online and then it scrapes all the metadata. Things that you may find useful, like if you have a photograph that was taken in a protest and you want to know where it was taken from, you may need to know the phone, so the focal length. So it may tell you this in the metadata, or there's software that allows you to know what kind of lens was used to take it, if it's a 50 millimeter or an 18 millimeter, and then you can again, these tools always change because everybody, I mean, a lot of corporate agents are invested in having these tools not work, so they keep on changing. So one must keep updating oneself and one must keep researching what tools exist to do what. Again, as we discussed in the beginning of the class, as the tools we have for clarification become more complex, the way perpetrators hide crimes become more and more complex, and then we have to become more and more. We have to find a way that we're not ambulance chasers, but that we are ahead in the clarification or technology. I mean, that's what to do, of course. But I've seen beautiful films made using open source or OSINT material online. About forums, about films about cryptocurrency, about internet communities, and you can find ways I've used a material source on the internet, either Vimeo videos or videos found on YouTube. I generally write to the authors and I say, hey, can I use this? And they always are like, you want it? Weird. Sure, you can. So, I encourage you, get in touch if you think it's fit. Also, it may be useful for you to research the legislation in your specific countries about copyright and fair use, especially when you're talking about the material and you're criticizing it or decoding the information from it. In a lot of places, this is considered fair use, so you don't have to ask for permission to use it. So you're using it in a way that is in the interest of the public. So I encourage you to, every country will have totally different legislations about fair use. So it's a little bit maybe pointless, for me to tell you a lot about it. I always ask for somebody in your country. I also think, is it possible that they're gonna report me for this? Because rarely happens. Or where can I publish it, etc. So this is my little thing about fair usage. Any questions, comments, concerns? About the project, does anybody have questions about the project? What kind of projects you want to do? You think, maybe Ishita?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about the scale of the project because everything that we saw today also was something that was done over years by a reasonably decent team of specialists who knew what they were doing, and there was a certain choreography of how the project sort of came into being. And I know that I'm not a documentary practitioner. I work on film essays usually, and I definitely don't work within the conflict segment of things. So whatever it is that I do would start from scratch. So any advice that you can give, because I'm really interested in learning how to do it, but I've not necessarily done it before, and nor do I have something ready to go. So what would you advise?
Yes, I have advice for this. My first advice is start right away. Trust your intuition and start right away. Do I want to make a film about this thing that is happening? Who are the actors? Write emails to them. Say, hey, can I meet you? And you meet them and you tell them, hey, and you can do it through Zoom or through phone. Hey, I'm doing a project about this. I'm developing it. I want to make a film. Please tell me, your story, or maybe set up an interview, and maybe a more formal interview, and interview them. But my question is, my suggestion is start right away, because when you put the first tone and you talk to the first person, they will give you a lot of links of places to go, and trust your intuition on where you go. So that's
okay. Thank you.
super. Ania.
Yes, hi. So I have a project that I'm working on, but I've never worked in this kind of way before. I'm more of a painter and stuff. So I have I made these interviews. One of them, it's a personal history project about a personal history of amnesia. And what I want to do is I made some recordings secretly. And what I want to do is to have them as sound pieces without any information given. So I want to take out the meaning, just have the sound of the person. So it's the opposite of what you usually do, is to change the voice. I want to keep the voice, but no content. So I was wondering if there's some programs that I've never worked with sound before, so I'm not a sound person. And I know there must be a way to do it. It's like pixelation, but in sound, right?
Yes. I mean, I encourage you to look at a program, at free programs at first. There's a lot of free programs to edit, and deal with sound. There is, I think, there's one, I think, Ableton perhaps is free. if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you can find, you know, like Ableton, and you can try it for free for 11 days or so if you want.
Okay.
And then if you want, you can find, you know, a way to keep going. I mean, definitely, it's a lot of software that you can. Audacity is actually really good. Excellent. Thank you so much, Adnan. Excellent. Yeah, Audacity is actually what is very common that people when they want to do sound and they're starting, it's phenomenal. So definitely start there. And also the beauty about this kind of softwares is that there's infinite amounts of tutorials online on how to use them. Again, I think, you know, having this kind of workshop, you know, offers a space that everybody can find, you know, the tools and techniques that they want. They will always change. The tools and techniques will never be the same. You know, in 10 years, you know, everything changes. In 5 years, everything changes. So keep that in mind. The same with the Bellingcat OSINT toolkit. The same with Audacity, with Adobe Premiere Pro. When I started editing, then now everybody is editing in Premiere Pro. And before this, it was everybody in Final Cut Pro. So you just have to keep learning and learning and learning, you know, software. So this is just kind of how it is.
Wait, so sorry. I think I missed yours. I got the other people's recommendations. What was yours?
Mine was the free trial of Ableton, but I think actually Audacity is a better way. I think Adnan is totally right that it's a way better way to get started.
Okay.
With sound editing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Because you will also find endless really good tutorials on YouTube.
Okay.
Like whatever you want to do, it's you know, there's always somebody in YouTube that knows it better. Mariel, you have a question.
Yes, hi. I wanted to ask you about the pitch. I have this idea, but I need to look into it to know how to address it. But the first thing that came into mind was search for Twitter and news media on what people are saying about this subject. But because this is a really sensitive subject in my country, it's similar to yours about the. It's not a internal conflict, but it's the terrorism that happened here, and the issue is that this year is 20th anniversary of the document, the official document that it was released about this period of violence, and there is discourse between the left and the right between about if the document is biased or not by the left. So it's a really controversial topic right now. And like 2 weeks ago, there was a kind of document that media made. They went to the museum of the memory of this event, and they went there and they were like, this is biased, see how this place portrays the level of violence of the state and the terrorism as equal, and it was not like that. So I wanted to do like a documentary about maybe, I don't know, going to the museum or maybe interviewing the people that were related to this document. So it's a very sensitive topic. I'm very scared of just asking people about this, but I think it's important. So I wanted to ask you if maybe like addressing it by what is the media saying, what are the people around them saying is enough, or maybe I should start, I don't know, like you said, just start interviewing people and see where it could lead me.
Actually, you know, if I were to give you advice, I would like trust your intuition. I think your intuition is probably the better advice because you're situated in it, so you understand it. But when you start talking to people about things and you start, because they live in it and they're dealing with it, you know, people who work perhaps in this museum or the people who are reporting about this museum, you can talk to both sides and then you can make your mind as well, if this is what you'd like. or you can portray, you know, different sides, or you can try to be impartial if you wish, which you know is doomed to failure. I think there's nothing as impartiality as we talked about, but sometimes it's good to have the pretext, you know, the pretext of trying to be impartial, to talk to everybody, just to find out that you don't agree with them anyways, as you probably believed in the beginning, or maybe it changes your mind. But when you talk to people, you will start seeing it more clearly, and you can maybe talk to people about the impressions online, so you can take, you know, I know this is like a very pop culture kind of thing, and you've probably all seen it, but you know, this thing where they read mean tweets to celebrities, you know, you could try to turn this format into a situated testimony exercise, where perhaps you read the tweets that people are writing to the people who are engaged in it, and you get the reactions. So you situate the testimonies inside of this space. I mean, perhaps this is just some ideas that come across. But I encourage you to, yeah, just talk to people, you know, meet them for coffee or call them, and or if they're, you know, or if they seem very busy and very formal, just tell them, I want to interview you, and you show up with your recording equipment and you interview them, and you say, this is for, you know, don't say it's for a class, you say you're presenting it at the New Center, and say it's an organization in Berlin or what have you. You know, you can always do that. I think people are more than happy to share, especially if there are people that are mediatic already. That's my token of advice. One last question before we part ways. Okay, so I will see you next week. I hope this was productive and engaging for you. It was very interesting to get to meet you, and I'm very excited to hear about your projects.
Thank you.
Vito, you're here, no?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Ciao, Victor.
Bye.